one of the biggest chemicals that you'll probably never hear about outside of me is called methylisothiazolinone. So it's known as MIT, and then there's chloromethylisothiazolinone. So, and just know it as CMIT, and I'll refer to that as such, so you don't have to try to memorize that or try to pronounce it, because even some of my mentors, they don't know how to pronounce it, and they're lovely people.
Yeah.
But these things are inherent in any kind of plastic. It's a biocide.
Right.
So it wants to kill anything, and
are these from petrochemicals?
These are petrochemicals. But even if they were from a natural chemical, right? Once you put these potent chemicals in, so there's a lot of chemical contamination even in essential oils, and it's a highly concentrated.
What is that from in the essential oils?
Well, because we have so you have to understand a little bit about how chemicals work, and if you go back to basic chemistry, you'll remember the concept that like dissolves like.
Right.
So if you put metal, like say iron, in an acid, right, the ionic aspect of the metal and the ionic aspect of the acid will dissolve in the solvent. So in petrochemicals, they're more organic chemicals, and thus their solvent is more fatty oriented, which is why we have these alcohols. But they're not alcohols like we have a rubbing alcohol at the house. That's a solvent. That's going to dissolve other organic matter, which is why if you couldn't get with soap and water the ink stain off, you might be able to get it off with something like an alcohol. So what happens is fat in our bodies and fats in the plants will start to accumulate these toxic components from the air. So plants will bring these in, even if they're organic. Even if they're not sprayed. Well, most plants are sprayed with all these chemicals.
Right.
So that's in the ground.
It's important to probably get more organic.
Coming down from the jet, the jet fuel and other things that are coming down from the sky.
Right.
Right. And it's just coming from the air naturally, as these things from even China.
So it's concentrated basically in the
oil. Well, then you distill it out and you concentrate it for that oil itself, but you're getting that oil plus anything else that's similar to that oil that was stored in the same parts of the plant as that oil.
But there are things in our current society that we can bring into the home safely. I mean, it can be overwhelming when even the stuff we thought is natural is actually toxifying our body. Is it mainly because of industrialized society that this is going on?
I often refer to Michael Pollan when he writes about food, the last 20 years. He's a New York Times journalist who wrote amazing books on food, and he wrote and talked about industrial food system, and that's back in 2005, 2006 is when I first started learning about industrial food. Or it was actually before that, but when I had that term, it crystallized it for me. Well, I applied that to medicine. I refer to our medical system mostly as industrial medicine. Well, it can be natural industrial and it can be synthetic industrial, but if it's the more industrial and processed the food is, or our medicine is, or our building materials are, the more they've been destroyed and prepared for fungi to come in and do, like, say, what fungi does, which is to break it down and turn it back into soil again.
So we want a more holistic approach to our living space and our lives, and that's kind of where your business
couldn't have said it better
in.
myself. Yeah, much more holistic.
Okay.
And so what happens is, even in my field, right, with building biology, or in other doctors, they'll, this person will be like the EMF person, and they'll say, hey, you can't do this, that, or the other from EMF. We've got to put up the shielding. But unfortunately, that shielding has that same MIT biocide a lot of times in it. So it's now going to affect somebody who's chemically sensitive. And just like behind us, we have this beautiful view of a mountain, here in Paradise Valley. And the light from the sunshine is reflecting off of it and radiating into that window and then reflecting back into this camera, right? So we even have... and I just totally lost where I was going. I'm so sorry, but
we're talking about holistic approach.
The holistic approach. So I was going into the reflection of how, when you talked about how if you put up the shielding, you can now, you're not just getting hit with it when it hits you. It then hits the reflection and it comes back and hits you again. So you always, and people sometimes will put up the shielding based on where antennas are in their neighborhood, based on some antenna search online, which is not the best way to do it. And the other challenge is that they may install another one that's closer to you, like, a month down the road, which I've had happen to some of my clients. So we have to be really careful in how we put things up and how expensive that is and how easy it is to take it back down, because we don't want to increase the financial burden on many of our sick clients.
So that's where the expertise of a consultant comes in,
Huge.
who can help you to determine the best placement for that type of material if it's needed.
It's also, I want to be clear, it's
Yeah.
based on that person as an individual in their environment. So in my business, one of the phrases that I coin is that, and this is more for what my medical practice will look like later, but we treat the whole person in their whole environment.
Yeah.
So you have to look at that person in their totality with all their genetic susceptibilities and what kind of food they're eating and their family situation and their social support and their emotional support and the energy that they have for healing or capacity and how many, what types of sensitivities or injuries they have. Because usually what we find is someone has like mold or Lyme first, and then they get like chemical sensitive, or sometimes it's chemical and then it's mold.
Really?
But then
I was wondering what might
electromagnetic
trigger this
is
stuff.
usually later. So they usually have all these other things going on, and so then they think, oh well, electrics is causing it. Well, no, electric's not usually causing it. It's what's driving you crazy with it. And it is affecting the mind, right? It is all in your head, but it's not because you psychologically have a problem. It's because it affects your immune system, it affects your neurologic system, and it affects your psychologic system.
So these are kind of the check engine lights along the way that people missed, and then when they get, by the time
and their
they
doctors
get to,
missed.
And their doctors missed,
Yeah.
and by the time they get to be electrosensitive, their body is like hugely compromised, their whole system, because of all these chronic exposures. So
Let me make. I want to throw in one more thing, analogy that I think you and a lot of your viewers will easily understand. 50 years ago, doctors were promoting cigarette smoking.
Yeah.
Left and right. And so if you had a person who came in was a smoker, right, and they said, "Oh, I've got asthma. I think it might be related to these cigarettes," they would say, "No, it has nothing to do with the cigarettes, right? Your cigarettes are healthy for you, right?" Some doctors knew better. But the point being is that at some point we got to the point where we said, hey, we need to ask people about smoking and drinking because of the devastating effects it has on life. And so now everybody knows, if you come in and you're a 2-pack-a-day smoker, and you've got asthma,
or heart problems.
Hey, maybe it's related to, the smoking. Like, people know that. They get that now.
At least you shouldn't be exacerbating it with the smoking and
at the very least.
Yeah.
But we now recognize that. But for decades, that wasn't the case.
Right.
People didn't recognize that, and it was fought.
And it's because of
by the same
industry.
vested interest. Well, I would just say vested interest because sometimes they're NGOs, they're non-governmental organizations. They can be nonprofits. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And
special interests, we'll just put it that
vested interest, special interest.
Yeah.
Someone who has a vested interest in making it go a certain way. Like, for example, that eggs are unhealthy for you, right? Or that meat is unhealthy for you. Both of those have been disproven so many times, but it still perpetuates because there's very vested interest.
Or fats. For a long time, people were eating low fat.
That's right.
And you need, some of those healthy fats to have, and you need cholesterol.
100%.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't make your hormones.
Or your hormones.
And you don't have an immune system.
Yeah, and your mucosal lining and all of your body, your eyes and everything else.
I wanted to finish that up though, which is to say that if I've got someone who comes in, so I want to make this point about a prevention and a treatment standpoint, because in my vision of it, I'm eventually, when I finish medical school, I'm going to be doing both the prevention and the treatment, which is something I don't know anybody else who's doing. But where I'm going with that is that if I take, let's say your aunt is a 2-pack-a-day smoker for 40 years, and we finally get her in and we get her to stop smoking, right? We fix someone's house, right? In this analogy. Okay. Just because we fix the house doesn't mean we've solved all the damage that's been done from 2-pack-a-day smoking for 40 years.
So now there's a therapy aspect.
Now there's a therapy aspect to try to help that person get better. The most important thing we've done is take that assault off of them. So when you asked me earlier if there's clients that we've worked with, we've fixed a mold problem, right? Right then and there sometimes, or an EMF problem, and then the symptoms will go away. Now their body, if we lived in a perfect world, if that were their only thing that were going on, their body would have the innate intelligence to rebuild itself and to make itself healthy again. But unfortunately, we usually have dozens to hundreds of these types of exposures in our workplace and in our home.
And we think it's normal and natural.
That's right.
But it's anything but.
And remember, it could be a life stress. Maybe someone's father just passed away, or they just got divorced,
Yeah.
or they've had to move several times, or they
That's
hate
a
their
toxin
job.
too.
These are
The
well,
stress.
they drive
Yeah.
endotoxins in the body. So it's not just the environmental or the
Yeah.
ecological. It's all of this stuff together. It's looking at that whole person.
Right.
And right now, while I'm in medical school, I can't diagnose or treat, and I
Right.
wouldn't do that. But I have enough medical research background that I can say, hey, you know what? These are risk factors
You're a
for such and
scientist.
such.
Yeah.
I am a scientist. Yeah. Environmental health science and epidemiology is my training, but so we can look at that and say, hey, I think you need to be with this doctor, because I have a whole network of doctors that I work with all over the country who are much better at specializing and understand and are aware of these things, or really gifted in getting someone to come back. So sometimes we work hand in hand, or oftentimes we'll work hand in hand to try to do that. But most docs don't know this stuff. Even
Right.
some of the